What to know about rising tuberculosis cases in the US? TB infections have been rising every year since 2020, after 30 years of decline. Now, a historic outbreak in Kansas is highlighting the disturbing trend. After declining for 3 decades, tuberculosis (TB) rates in the US have been increasing steadily since 2020. According to a Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report from the end of 2024. It's a disturbing trend given that 1.5 million die from TB every year, making it the world's most infectious killer. Now, a recent outbreak in Kansas City, Kansas, has gained national attention and concern. Through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, has since refuted claims that this is the largest outbreak in recorded US history. The numbers are still historically high. As of January 24, two people have died from TB. 67 67 are being treated for active infections, and another 79 have latent infections. Nationwide, 2023 saw the highest number of cases reported in the last decade. Most of these recent cases are not instances of novel transmission, but sudden activation of latent infections that were undetected or improperly treated. While TB impacts thousands nationally and millions around the world, most people in the US are not at risk of developing TB, says Philip Loeb, director of the CDC's Division of Tuberculosis Elimination. Compared with high TB incidence, countries like India, China, and the Philippines, the chance of infection in the US is still one of the lowest in the world. But the recent trend reversal has raised questions and some alarm bells among infectious disease and public health experts. Here, they offer insight into the causes and implications of the latest outbreak and sudden upswing in cases. What is tuberculosis and why is it so serious? Tuberculosis is one of the oldest and deadliest diseases in human history. For millennia, the infection has afflicted people around the globe, earning ominous nicknames like the White Plague, consumption, and even the robber of youth. A century and a half ago, TB was essentially a death sentence. Roughly 80% of active infections were fatal. Since then, rates have been on a decline in the US and abroad, thanks to a new vaccines, diagnosis, and antibiotic treatments. The disease is caused by a highly contagious bacterial infection that primarily affects the lungs but can also damage the kidneys, heart, bones, joints, and blood vessels. If it spreads, it can cause meningitis, swelling of the brain and spinal cord, or hepatitis, inflammation of the liver. Even the people who don't die of the disease, they're hospitalized and have a lot of long term problems from having TB, says Priya Sheet, Associate Medical Professor and co director of the University of California, San Francisco Center for Tuberculosis. TB transmits through prolonged exposure to infectious airborne particles, such as from coughing or sneezing. A person infected with TB often does not display symptoms or know they're sick for weeks or even years, called a latent infection. But the infection may become active and contagious at any time. Even if the bacteria is detected and an effective antibiotic is prescribed, the treatment regimen is long, several months, which makes patient compliance difficult. We need consultant surveillance and suppression to keep TB in a latent form, says Jeffrey Cox, professor of immunology and pathogenesis at University of California, Berkeley. If you remove that pressure, the bacteria can then start growing again. While both preventable and curable, TB remains a leading infectious killer worldwide, claiming over 1 million lives every year. The disease affects millions in every country and age group, but hits particularly hard in low and middle income populations. Why are TB rates rising in the US? From a public health perspective, it's no surprise that tuberculosis counts have been on the rise since 2020. When the pandemic hit, reporting of other communicable diseases like TB initially plummeted as the majority of resources went towards COVID. Most countries actually had a dip in cases from 2019 to 2020, Cox says, but that doesn't mean that TB went down. In fact, the pandemic era emphasis on the coronavirus tracing and treatment may have followed TB infections to multiply unchecked. A lot of those lower priority activities of healthcare, maintenance, and prevention were deferred, says Sheet. We weren't doing a great job prioritizing TB prevention. Cox describes a sort of snowball effect. If people don't get tested or report infections, they don't get the treatment they need and can transmit the infection to others. Warning mask wearing and increased travel can also exacerbate the spread.